The story begins with the protagonist running away from a girl, internally explaining that the reason he joined the Public Morals Committee is to cultivate a healthy mind. He aspires to maintain proper relationships and an appropriate distance from everyone, no matter who they are. As he flees, another girl notices the commotion and remarks that they're still at it. The pursuing girl finally catches up to him, questioning why Shu-chan ran from her. He responds with exasperation, asking why she insists on interfering with his goals. She ignores his complaint, instead reminding him that it's time for lunch. Producing a bento, she proudly declares that she prepared extra food today so he should eat a lot. Reluctantly, he agrees but immediately requests that she get off of him. Her response is one of genuine confusion as she questions if guys don't like being in such close proximity. He shoots back that it's impossible to eat while lying down. Misinterpreting his tone, she nervously asks if he's angry. With a deadpan expression, he confirms that he is and bluntly tells her that girls shouldn't jump on a guy's crotch like that. Her pout deepens as she accuses him of acting overly strict, like a stereotypical morals committee member. She insists it's no big deal since they're childhood friends. Calm but firm, he reminds her that he isn't acting, he is a member, and tells her she should develop a sense of embarrassment. Unfazed, she declares she has none because she is a succubus. With a resigned sigh, he introduces her in his thoughts. Yasujiki Sayo, his childhood friend who is half human and half succubus. He warns her to keep her succubus nature suppressed while at school. She scoffs, asking what's wrong with expressing herself and pointing out that it might even be trendy these days. Teasingly, she inquires if being close to her made him feel the urge to attack her. To him, Sayo is the first obstacle on his list of ways to achieve a healthy lifestyle. He tries to redirect the conversation, but she changes gears, disappointed that he won't indulge her. She leans in, poking his side and seductively whispering that she thought he was finally interested. By that, she explicitly means lovemaking. She asserts control over the moment, letting her hand trail across his body, but he quickly bolts away. Undeterred, she reminds him of the promise he made to her that he would do it when he turned 18. Startled, he stammers, pretending not to understand. Her teasing smile widens as she clarifies, asking if he prefers things to be different. Flustered, he denies her suggestion but struggles to regain his composure. Leaning closer, she whispers in his ear that it's fine, gently climbing onto him. She promises to take care of him forever. His face turns bright red, and he awkwardly tries to push her away. He snaps, begging her to stop whispering in his ear, but she persists, pouting as she questions whether he dislikes her advances. Sayo explains, in a voice dripping with seduction, that there is no greater happiness than loving someone they cherish. At his wit's end, he finally scolds her, saying she always imposes her own desires without considering his feelings. He urges her to stop projecting her values onto him. Her expression falters momentarily before she responds innocently, pointing out that she already takes care of him daily. She cooks his meals, wakes him up, and even checks his temperature while he sleeps. The last revelation stuns him into silence, his face frozen in disbelief. Snatching a book from her hand, he mutters that her behavior is creepy. He reiterates that they're only childhood friends and insists her actions are inappropriate. He orders her to stop following him around. Gloom shadows her face as she quietly accepts his words. Feeling guilty, he scratches his head and sighs, muttering that she's a real handful. Hesitantly, he returns the book and explains that he isn't rejecting her outright. Be it now or in the future, he values the relationship, but ignoring each other's boundaries is not the way forward. Before he can finish, her expression brightens with sudden understanding. He's baffled by her reaction, but she cheerfully declares it's unfair that she knows so much about him while he knows so little about her. Relieved, she seems to grasp his point, and he agrees, but her demeanor shifts back to playful seduction. In a close tone, she asks if he wants her to show him just how much she desires him. His confusion intensifies as she takes his hand, causing his face to flush a deep red. Without warning, she begins gently licking his hand. Startled and horrified, he jerks back, only for her to casually explain that dogs show affection to their partners this way. As she continues, his head grows heady, and he wonders if this is some sort of succubus technique. Smiling mischievously, she adds that the quickest way to show love is, and she trails off, licking her lips suggestively. He snaps, shouting for her to stop. Just as he raises his voice, the school bell rings. Disappointed, she notes his cute whine and teases that it's adorable, adding they'll continue this later. Exasperated and furious, he warns her never to touch him again. His thoughts spiral as he laments whether he'll ever manage to maintain a healthy relationship at school. Sayo gazes at Shu with an intense, questioning look, asking why he won't show her affection or truly care for her. Her words fluster him, and he stammers, questioning why he would even consider such a thing. He reminds her that they're still children and that such actions aren't good or healthy. She brightens up, asking if it would be acceptable to do so once they're adults. Shu, exasperated, replies that her suggestion misses the point entirely. Undeterred, she leans closer, seductively proposing that he teach her his version of what's healthy. Her questions begin to flow rapidly, each more teasing than the last, leaving him bewildered and visibly flustered. She presses further, asking him which boundaries are safe, to which he hastily warns her not to be so reckless. With a pout, she insists she can't hold back anymore. Before he can respond, she climbs on top of him, her playful tone laced with mischief as she asks if he won't measure her healthiness. Shu panics, shouting at her to wait, but his yell jolts him awake. Gasping, he realizes it was all just a dream. Yet the moment his mind begins to settle, his heart skips a beat as he notices Sayo beside him. She greets him with a playful smile. Startled, he stares at her, demanding to know why she always barges into his room uninvited. She laughs lightly, reminding him that she's a succubus. Shu retorts that she's also half human, so such behavior isn't justified. Unfazed, she grins and clarifies that she didn't barge in uninvited. She had already obtained his mother's permission. He groans in frustration, commenting that she's managing his entire life, calling her a real demon. Ignoring his complaint, she records the time, 7:34 a.m., and he angrily tells her to stop documenting his life. With a blush, she explains that everything she does is for their future. Sho stiffens, accusing her of planning to eat him in more ways than one. Sayo dismisses his worry, assuring him that she'll handle everything for him until he turns 18. Switching topics, she asks if he has work this morning, mentioning none other than his duties with the Public Morals Committee. Startled, Shu nervously questions how she knows his schedule so well. She casually explains that proper sleep requires rhythm. He sleeps and wakes at consistent times, which helps him maintain a healthy lifestyle. Suspicious, he asks if she used some sort of aphrodisiac in his dreams. Smiling, she admits to it, asking if he enjoyed his lovey-dovey dream. Embarrassed, he snaps at her to stop giving him that knowing look and admonishes her for interfering with other people's dreams. She giggles, revealing that she only added a small touch of horniness and that the rest was all him. Leaning in, she sniffs him, her expression shifting into one of playful curiosity. She remarks that he hasn't done it in 3 days. Shu, utterly baffled, demands clarification, and she explains that as a succubus, she can sense it from his scent. Shu's patience snaps, and he yells that her obsession with love and intimacy gives her a warped sense of entitlement, where she believes she can do anything she pleases. Sayo innocently asks if she truly can't, to which he firmly responds that she absolutely cannot. Pointing at her, he declares that she can't use lovey-dovey as an excuse to invade his privacy. Still grinning, she cheekily inquires if he enjoyed the dream. Flustered, he counters that enjoyment isn't the issue. Frustrated, he nervously asks why she always assumes they'll end up doing something so intimate. Sayo simply reminds him of the promise he made her. He fumbles for negation, but she presses on, insisting that love requires open expression. She declares that she's willing to do anything for him, because to her, that's what love means. Her declaration leaves him red-faced, stammering as he nervously compliments her. She asks if he's serious, her teasing tone returning, and playfully wonders if it means he intends to be closer to her. Sho quickly waves her off, accusing her of manipulating him with the dream for her convenience. She looks puzzled for a moment, then smiles slyly. Confused, Sho demands to know what's on her mind. She asks cryptically if he saw her dream. He stares at her, baffled, trying to explain that her aphrodisiac influenced his thoughts. Sayo cuts him off, clarifying that she only gave him a little push. The content of his dream came entirely from his imagination. She leans closer, her smile widening as she teases that what he dreamed reflects his own desires. She purrs, clearly amused that he is a pervert. Despite his vehement protests, her words make him self-conscious, which only pleases her further. Furious, Shu yells at her to get out of his room. His phone buzzes incessantly. Meanwhile, in another location, a girl looks at her own phone, her expression dark. She mutters that he is ignoring her calls, and he sure is gutsy. Afterward, he walks to school, muttering to himself about the chaos Sayo caused that morning. He quickly rephrases, blaming her for forcing him to skip his duties. Frustrated, he sighs, resolving to apologize to his senpai later. Suddenly, a voice from behind interrupts his thoughts. A girl commands him to come with her. Startled, Shu turns to see who it is. Meanwhile, Sayo cheerfully enters his classroom, carrying a neatly packed lunchbox. She beams as she announces that she prepared a meal of okra and soft-shelled turtle, especially for him. But her expression shifts to confusion when she doesn't see Sho anywhere. Turning to a nearby classmate, she inquires about his whereabouts. The boy informs her that the student council president summoned Shao earlier. Sayo freezes in shock, horrified that the lunch she prepared might go uneaten. In the student council room, Hikawa Amane, the student council president, stares down at Shu. She remarks coldly that he skipped his morning duties and arrived at school with his childhood friend, and he must be feeling quite pleased with himself. Amane, known for her icy demeanor, is infamous as both a strict leader and a ruthless enforcer of school rules. Sho hastily tries to explain himself, but she grabs his tie, cutting him off. She states sharply that this is the 35th time he has used Sayo's name as an excuse. Her touch instantly freezes his tie. Alarmed, she apologizes, explaining that her body acts on reflex due to her nature. Like Sayo, Amane isn't entirely human. She carries the blood of a Yuki-onna. As Shu tries to adjust his frozen tie, he awkwardly reminds her that she's standing too close. She tells him to not pay it any attention, brushing off his discomfort. She then reprimands him, reminding him that it's not just her and Sayo with special constitutions. It's also his responsibility, as Yasujiki-sama, to maintain peace in the school and prevent any friction between the different races. Shu nods in agreement, reaffirming his commitment to fostering a healthy and righteous high school life. Yet he admits, his recent actions have caused unnecessary trouble. Amane listens in silence, her expression unreadable. Concerned by her lack of response, Shu asks if something is wrong. Her sudden question takes him aback. She asks why he is so obsessed with it. Her voice tinged with curiosity. Recovering from his surprise, Shu begins to explain that it's not possible to get along with everyone, but they all have to deal with people they dislike. He believes there's a line where compromise can be reached. Amane listens attentively as he continues. Conflicts and fights happen when people overstep boundaries, but finding that balance is crucial. He knows this might seem obvious, but isn't it important to try? He wants to expand his understanding, learn more about others, and build healthy relationships with everyone. Amane tilts her head slightly, digesting his words. Finally, she nods. That does sound like something he would say. Her approval, however, is laced with an odd intensity. She moves closer to him, prompting Shu to nervously declare that he wants to have a healthy relationship between them. Her expression shifts to one of mild confusion, asks what he is saying, her voice soft yet firm. Flustered, Shao stammers that she is scolding him, yet she is so close. And it's not like they are in that kind of relationship. Amane's cheeks redden slightly, but she closes the gap further, insisting that this is a healthy distance between them. Shu, utterly bewildered, struggles to form a coherent response. Before he can react, Amane removes her glove and touches his chin with her bare finger. Her cold touch sends a shiver through him as she leans in seductively. She murmurs, for someone as hopeless as him, he needs someone perfect like her to guide him. If she doesn't keep an eye on him, things like this will happen. Her icy fingers trail along his skin, and Shu feels a chill spreading through his hands. Then her tone shifts. She asks him one more question, what did he and Sayo do this morning, her voice sharper now. Shu freezes, startled by her sudden interrogation. He blurts out, explaining that they just commuted to school together. Her expression darkens. Gripping his arm, Amane's frosty powers surge, freezing his sleeve. She accuses, while she was calling him, he was enjoying time with her. Panicked, Shu hurriedly tries to clarify that she came to his futon uninvited. Amane's demeanor shifts immediately. Her eyes glint with icy fury as she forms a blade of ice on her fingertip, pressing it dangerously close to his neck. Tell me everything, she demands, her voice low and threatening. Shu is paralyzed with fear, unable to respond, when the temperature in the room suddenly changes. Sayo bursts in, exclaiming that she finally found him. She pauses, noticing the frigid atmosphere and the standoff between Shu and Amane. Turns to Sayo, her tone sharp, and asks why she entered without permission. Ignoring her completely, Sayo strides toward Shu. Grabbing his hand, she says casually that they should go because it's freezing in here. Shu, relieved by her interruption, stands up and lets her lead him out of the room, silently thanking her for saving him. Back home, he coughs and checks his temperature. Realizing he's caught a cold, After Senpai scolded him earlier, he hadn't had time to change clothes before heading to class. Complaining about his incessantly runny nose, his attention abruptly shifts to Sayo and Amane, who are both fussing over him with overly excessive care. Unsurprisingly, the two fail to get along and start bickering. Annoyed, he demands to know why they're in his room. While he can somewhat understand Sayo's presence, he hesitates when it comes to Amane. Before he can finish, Senpai cuts in with a frosty tone, asking if her being there is an issue. Startled, he stammers, explaining he didn't mean it that way. Amane raises an eyebrow and retorts that it should be obvious she came to nurse him since his current state is partly her fault. Sayo, meanwhile, hugs him from behind and informs him that his mother will be home late. Flustered, he tells her to stop, warning she might catch his cold. Sayo nonchalantly reminds him that, as a succubus, she's immune. He groans, insisting that her being a succubus has nothing to do with avoiding illness. Amane glares at the two, leaving him to wonder if they'll ever get along. Sighing, he declares he doesn't eat nursing, just a cold and some sleep will fix it. Sayo insists he rest, promising to handle everything. Suddenly, Sayo sneezes. Amane smirks and asks if she's caught a cold, to which Sayo snaps back that it's because she's standing too close to her. Amane icily explains that her body naturally emits cold air and tells Sayo not to blame her for something intrinsic. Curious, he asks if the mayonnaise chill doesn't bother her. She calmly explains she's fine with cold but struggles in heat, noting her icy aura is just a defense mechanism. Sayo nods in understanding, prompting him to comment that Amane must be dealing with a lot. Turning to Sayo, Amane inquires why, with her succubus abilities to manipulate minds and even reality, she doesn't use them. Sayo firmly replies that forcing love would ruin its meaning. What she truly wants is for him to say, "I love you," from the heart. Amane absorbs this answer, calling Sayo romantic. After their excessive care, Sayo asks how he's feeling. He admits to feeling slightly better, but she points out his fever hasn't subsided. Amane reminds him fevers don't vanish instantly. Noticing his sweat-soaked shirt, Sayo takes it upon herself to remove it without permission. Alarmed, he protests, but Sayo insists it's necessary to avoid worsening his cold. He turns to Amane for support, only for her to blush faintly while agreeing with Sayo. The two girls begin wiping him down, leaving him feeling awkward and ticklish. Sayo comments on how squishy his skin feels, prompting Amane to agree reluctantly. When Sayo accuses her of touching him inappropriately, she retorts she's merely cleaning. Overwhelmed, he falls back onto the bed, pulling the blanket over all three of them in an effort to calm them down. At that moment, his mother enters the room, only to find the three of them tangled together under the blanket. Her terrifying expression freezes him in place as he scrambles to explain the situation, though it's unclear whether his words do anything to help. At school, he realizes he has forgotten to bring his umbrella. Remembering that he was tasked with picking up some ingredients, he decides to finish the errand quickly before the rain starts. The thought of catching a cold again, especially after just recovering, makes him anxious. He knows that if it happens, Sayo and Amane will likely resume their excessive nursing efforts. As he contemplates this, Sayo suddenly appears behind him, startling him. He turns and asks why she is there and what she's doing with the book in her hands. She tilts her head innocently and counters his question, explaining that she followed his scent to find him. He wonders aloud how she can even do that. She reminds him with a playful smile that she is a succubus, so it's only natural for her. Changing the subject, she asks him how her outfit looks and whether it's cute. He hesitates before replying that it is. She notices his bag and asks what he is doing. He explains that his mother has asked him to buy some ingredients. Sayo immediately offers to accompany him. While he doesn't mind, he points out that the errand isn't anything exciting. She, however, excitedly calls it a date and loops her arm around his. Embarrassed, he tells her to stop interpreting it that way. Sayo remarks that it's been a long time since they last went out together. He nods in agreement, recalling how she used to hide behind him back then. She smiles wistfully, reminiscing about how they always played together, before accusing him of avoiding her lately. Caught off guard, he quickly changes the subject and asks if there's anything she's looking for while they're out. Sayo replies that there is, prompting him to suggest they take care of it first since carrying heavy groceries around later would be inconvenient. She smirks and asks if he truly wants to help her. Shyly, he explains that after how she nursed him back to health, the least he can do is carry her bags. Her smile brightens as she agrees, teasing that she'll even let him pick. The scene shifts to a shop, where he stands flustered while Sayo holds up two items, a black pear and an aqua pear. She looks at him expectantly and asks which one he prefers. Embarrassed, he stammers, telling her not to bring up such topics. She, however, playfully counters that they're simply preparing for their special moment together and teases him by saying she's letting him choose her favorite outfit. Blushing furiously, he tells her to stop testing his limits. She decides on the black pair, remarking that it's also his favorite color. Too embarrassed to respond, he turns away as she heads toward the cashier. Sayo turns back, grinning mischievously, and tells him to wait for her. She adds that next time she'll wear it and show him, making his face turn an even deeper shade of red. Stammering, he reminds her to hurry and pay for it. Nearby, he overhears a group of girls talking about how cute Sayo looked. One of them mentions noticing that Sayo had a tail, while another speculates that she must be a succubus, citing her unusual aura. One girl goes further, accusing Sayo of hooking up with men all the time. Their tone irritates him, and he feels his anger rising. She returns, also noticing, thanking him for waiting with her usual radiant smile. He, however, responds coldly, asking why she's smiling. In the elevator, as they ascend, Sayo teasingly uses her tail to poke him. Flustered, he demands to know why she did that. She tilts her head and asks if he's furious. He denies it, though his tone suggests otherwise. She guesses it's because of the girl's gossip, but reassures him that she doesn't care about what others think of her, only what he thinks. She adds with a sly smile that the girls were probably just jealous. She pokes him again with her tail, and he warns her seriously to stop. Sayo pouts, insisting she's also serious and reminding him that they are on a date, so he should stop talking about boring topics. He tries to explain that his concern is for her. She brushes it off, saying she only cares about being lovey-dovey, not what others think. She starts calling him silly names, testing his patience further. Finally, he snaps, calling her an idiot. In response, she sticks her tongue out and calls him names too, catching him off guard. He tries to continue, saying that even if she's fine with it, when suddenly, the elevator shakes violently. Both are startled as the elevator comes to an abrupt stop. Realizing they're trapped, their faces end up just inches apart. At his home, his mother is anxiously waiting for him, unable to finish cooking because of his delay. She wonders what could be keeping him so long when, suddenly, the lights go out, startling her. Confused and concerned, she wonders what could be happening, only to realize something unsettling. Meanwhile, back to Sayo and Shu. He mentions that the power outage will likely last for at least an hour. Sayo's expression turns sour, and Shu, noticing her irritation, looks at her in confusion. She glares at him and sharply asks what he wants. Bewildered, he responds cautiously, only for her to cut him off by telling him not to speak to her. Shu tries to reason with her, reminding her that they're stuck in this cramped space because of the blackout, and adds that she always behaves like this in such situations. Sayo pouts and remains stubbornly silent. Finally, Shu sighs and apologizes, admitting that he must have ruined her mood. He continues, acknowledging that it's been a long time since they'd gone out together, and he feels guilty for spoiling the moment. He apologizes again, his voice sincere. Sayo, still quiet, glances at him but says nothing. Shu takes a deep breath and confesses that, despite how much time they've spent together, he still feels like he doesn't really understand her. Her earlier comment stings, and he mutters that it makes him feel inadequate. Sayo suddenly calls out his name, her tone softer, though her lips are still in a pout. She admits that his obliviousness is both the part she loves and hates about him. Her words catch Shu off guard, and he stares at her in disbelief. She continues, her voice steady but carrying a hint of vulnerability. She reminds him of a similar incident from their past. Back then, as a succubus, she stood out in ways that often made her a target for ridicule or unwelcome advances. People assumed she was easy to exploit, and it was always Shu who stepped in to defend her. Sayo explains that those experiences have left her a little more introverted now. Whenever they meet, it's always somewhere far from the public eye. She looks at him directly and asks if he still sees her the same way he did back then. She reminds him that they're not children anymore, and in the adult world, they must sometimes swallow their discomfort and face things head-on. Sayo urges Shu to truly look at her, not just as someone he needs to protect, but as she is now. Hearing her words, Shu's face flushes slightly. He mutters under his breath that his actions come from a place of concern. Sayo, tilting her head, asks if he said something, and Shu, flustered, quickly covers by apologizing again. He admits that she's right, he hasn't been looking at her properly, and takes responsibility for his mistake. Sayo's lips curl into a proud smile, and she remarks smugly that it's good he's finally realized. Suddenly, Shu's remark surprises her. A moment of realization dawns on Sayo's face, and she speculates aloud that perhaps the cramped space and close proximity have triggered an aphrodisiac effect on him without his realizing it. Just as Sayo's playful smirk widens, the door to their confined space bursts open, revealing a group of workers. They look at the two of them curiously and ask if they're all right. They freeze for a moment before Shu nervously responds, expressing relief that they can finally leave. Sayo, however, looks visibly disappointed, muttering under her breath about being so close to her goal. Shu, still reeling from the experience, avoids looking directly at her as they exit. The scene shifts to a different setting. A dimly lit room belonging to a half-human girl sits by the window, watching the rain fade away. She sighs, dreading tomorrow's school day, with no desire to attend. The girl from earlier, now running frantically from something. Her breathing is labored, and the strange sensation she had felt before begins to overwhelm her. Back to Shu, Sayo approaches him cheerfully and suggests they head home together. Noticing something, she asks what he is doing. Amane also notices her arrival. Shu explains that they're looking for a dog. Sayo, curious, asks for the reason, and Amane, irritated, elaborates that they have been tasked with finding a dog that has been wandering in and out of the school grounds. Sayo nervously questions whether this sort of task really falls under the jurisdiction of the student council. Shu explains that it could be dangerous if the dog harms someone, which is why the teacher asked them to handle it. He adds regretfully that this is why he can't accompany her home. Sayo suddenly notices something and points toward a figure in the distance, asking if he means that dog. Shu looks in the direction she indicates, and instead of spotting a stray, he sees a husky. Before he can respond, Sayo, smiling, moves closer to the dog. Alarmed, Shu warns her not to approach it, but before he can stop her, the dog lunges at her. Acting on instinct, Shu throws himself in front of Sayo to shield her. Both Sayo and Amane cry out his name in concern. Shu opens his eyes to find the dog licking him instead of attacking. Realizing it's friendly, he hesitantly asks if it wants to play. The dog wags its tail, and soon Shu is laughing and playing with it, surprising Sayo and Amane. Watching the scene, Amane asks if Shu has experience with dogs. Sayo explains he raised one as a child. Observing the dog's obedient behavior, Sayo wonders aloud if it has an owner. Amane speculates that it might have run away from home. Suddenly, the husky's form begins to shift, and before their astonished eyes, it transforms into the girl from earlier. All three of them freeze, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Shu, equally flustered, asks for Sayo's help, but she seems more focused on her growing irritation. She demands an explanation for the situation. Shu's face pales as he struggles to respond. Amane, stepping in with a chillingly calm tone, suggests they head to the student council room to sort this out. In the student council room, Shu, now composed, asks the girl if she's calmed down. Trembling slightly, she nods and replies that she has. He reassures her not to worry about Sayo and Amane, who are both standing nearby. He then asks if she's a first-year student. The girl nervously introduces herself as Inu Yumimi. Curious, Shu asks her to explain what happened earlier. Yumimi, still visibly nervous, stammers as she explains that her condition is a part of her constitution. Sayo, blunt as ever, interrupts and asks if she means transforming into a dog. Yumimi quickly corrects her, clarifying that it's not a dog but a wolf. Shu, intrigued, asks if she loses consciousness during her transformations. Yumimi explains that when she transforms, it feels as though she's in a trance, and before she knows it, the transformation is over. Amane, analyzing the situation, deduces that she has no control over her condition. Sayo, however, snaps that lack of control doesn't excuse her behavior, particularly pushing Shu down earlier. Flustered, he reminds Sayo that her remark is irrelevant to their current discussion. Redirecting the conversation, he points out that while they now know the dog's identity, they can't exactly report this to the school. Both the girls reluctantly agree. Yumimi, looking increasingly uneasy, seems lost in thought. Sayo notices and asks if something is bothering her. Stuttering, Yumimi nervously insists that it's nothing. She hesitates before confessing that she feels like a burden. She admits that her inability to control her condition might lead to her harming others and wonders if it would be better for her to stop attending school altogether. Shu, disapproving of her self-deprecating attitude, firmly tells her that avoiding the problem isn't a solution. Surprised by his conviction, she looks at him questioningly. He explains that if her condition is troubling her, then she should work toward managing it. He adds that the very reason he joined the Public Morals Committee was to ensure that everyone could maintain healthy and respectful relationships. Both girls nod in agreement once more, showing their support. Shu then suggests that they begin tracking her progress to help her regain control. He asks if she's okay with the idea. Blushing, Yumimi hesitates, then shyly asks if it means she'll get more paths from him. Realizing her words, her face turns crimson, and she hurriedly tells him to forget it. Shu, puzzled but agreeable, nods. Nervously, she explains that seeing his rugged hands sends a strange tingling through her, punctuating her awkward confession with a laugh. It has been a week since Yumimi joined the group, and Sayo observes her behavior with increasing concern. She watches as Shu struggles to fend off Yumimi's antics. Nervously, Sayo questions whether the situation has only worsened over time. Amane nods in agreement. Sayo flusters, voicing her fear that if this continues, Shu might eventually fall in love with Wolf-chan. Amane, trying to calm her, explains that the likelihood of such a scenario is slim. Meanwhile, Shu, overwhelmed, calls out to them in desperation, begging for their help. At that moment, Yumimi tackles him, pinning him to the ground as she begins licking his face. Exhausted, he sighs in defeat. After a moment, Yumimi reverts to her human form and immediately begins apologizing profusely. Shu reassures her that it's all right, but her face remains downcast as she regrets that, despite all his efforts, nothing seems to be working. He gently reminds her that there's no need to rush the process. Amane steps forward, her tone analytical as she explains that the root cause of powers like Yumimi's often stems from internal emotions. It's something she has frequently read and heard about. Sayo adds her own observations, pointing out a clear pattern. Yumimi's transformations occur only after school. She doesn't attack anyone except Shu, and she always reverts to her human form after a set period. Sayo narrows her eyes thoughtfully and wonders aloud why Yumimi targets Shu specifically. Suddenly, a wild idea crosses Sayo's mind. She blurts out, asking if Yumimi wants to do lovey-dovey things with Shu. Yumimi's face turns crimson at Sayo's words, and she flails, vehemently denying the implication. Embarrassed, she insists that it's not like that. Sayo presses further, asking why. Then, Yumimi is so fixated on Shu. Blushing deeply, Yumimi stammers before admitting that she's drawn to him because he feels good to touch. She hastily apologizes, trying to explain that she doesn't mean it in a weird way. Yumimi, struggling to clarify, continues, confessing that when she's in her wolf form and Shu touches her, it makes her feel safe and comfortable, and it even causes her insides to tighten. Sayo looks at her, horrified, and accuses her of harboring romantic feelings for Shu. Yumimi, flustered, quickly denies it, explaining that their relationship is purely physical. Shu, visibly exasperated, interjects, telling her not to phrase things so misleadingly. Before he can say more, Yumimi suddenly tackles him again. Blushing, she accuses him of teasing her with his touch and demands that he take responsibility for his actions. Sayo immediately steps in, declaring possessively that Shu belongs to her. Mortified, Shu yells at Sayo to stop talking, realizing her words are only making the situation worse. Yumimi, now emboldened, proclaims in a flustered voice that she's fine with just having Xiao's right hand. Shu, completely baffled, stammers as he asks her what she means by that. Amane, stepping in with her usual calm authority, orders them to stop. A chill runs down Xiao's spine as he senses her growing impatience. She raises her hand and, with a gesture, freezes water into an icy collar. Addressing Yumimi directly, she declares that if Yumimi wants Xiao's attention so badly, she'll have to become a pet of the student council. He looks at her in utter disbelief, demanding an explanation for how she arrived at such a conclusion. Amane tilts her head slightly, as if confused by his objection, and asks if there's something wrong with her logic. Shu groans, explaining that this approach won't solve the root of the problem. Amane firmly disagrees. She points out that after observing Yumimi for a week, it's clear that she's still unfamiliar with her surroundings. Sayo, catching on, asks if Amane is implying that Yumimi is a loner. Yumimi finally opens up, revealing that she struggles to make friends, which leads her feeling isolated at school. Just when she thinks she can escape the suffocating environment by going home, her transformation triggers. Hearing this, Sayo notices that Yumimi's mood has turned somber. Amane concludes that the transformations are tied to suppressed emotions and worsen when those emotions remain bottled up. She suggests that the fastest way to manage it is for Yumimi to release her feelings in a healthy way whenever she can. Shu, understanding the logic, suggests that Yumimi could vent her emotions in their presence to prevent her wolf form from taking over. Over time, he assures her she'll gain control of her powers. Yumimi, nodding hesitantly, agrees with the assessment. However, Shu still protests Amane's decision to put a collar on her, insisting it's unnecessary. Amane, undeterred, argues that it's symbolic and will help Yumimi adjust to her new role in the student council. Yumimi tries to interject, but Amane cuts her off, extending her hand in a gesture of welcome. With a warm smile, she formally invites her to join the student council. Yumimi's face lights up, and she happily accepts. Sayo, watching the exchange, asks Sho if he's really okay with this. He shrugs, replying that it's fine as long as Yumimi is comfortable with the arrangement. Sayo leans in close to Yumimi, whispering mischievously that being part of the council means she'll always have access to Shu's attention and pats. Yumimi blushes deeply, a shy smile spreading across her face. Amane, observing the dynamic, muses to herself that with proper training, Yumimi could become a formidable rival for Sayo. As the group settles into their new arrangement, Shu notices that Yumimi has already started behaving more obediently, almost as if she's been tamed. Later, Amane approaches Shu and asks if she could have a moment with him. Shu agrees, but before they can step aside, Inui also timidly requests his attention. Watching the scene unfold, Sayo's expression twists into a pout. Frustrated, she blurts out, demanding to know what Yumimi and Amane want with Shu-kun. Sayo's sudden outburst surprises them. Stammering, she complains that it's unfair how they're flirting with him without including her. Taken aback, Amane calmly explains that they are merely discussing student council matters. Sayo huffs, insisting she should be allowed to join the student council as the person in charge of Shu. Amane raises an eyebrow and informs her in an even tone that no such position exists. Moreover, the student council would never recognize a role that might disrupt public morale. Sayo, refusing to back down, points out that Amane let Yumimi join despite her unusual circumstances. Yumimi explains that her inclusion is meant to help her manage her uncontrollable transformations and stresses that, within the council, she is officially designated as their dog. Sayo understands that she is unbothered by the label. The tension between the three girls escalates, making Shu visibly uncomfortable. Just as he attempts to intervene, both Sayo and Amane simultaneously order him to remain silent. Sayo, growing bolder, declares with conviction that Shu will have lovey-dovey moments with her and her alone, and she'll never hand him over to anyone else. Shu immediately tells her to calm down, and Yumimi nervously agrees, interjecting that Shu belongs to everyone. Shu, exasperated, reminds her that he most certainly does not and urges her to stop speaking because Sayo is prone to taking such statements far too seriously. Predictably, Sayo gasps in horror and asks if this means Shu intends to share his lovey-dovey time with all of them. Realizing the conversation is spiraling out of control, Shu tries to clarify, but Sayo's expression darkens. Her face gloomy, she pulls out a small bottle of aphrodisiac and dramatically declares that if that's what Shu wishes. Everyone freezes in shock at her words. Shu, panicked, pleads with her to stop being so impulsive. Sayo accuses him of flirting with other girls, her voice trembling with jealousy. Shu, flustered, insists that he's merely been working. Sayo's voice softens, but her emotions pour out as she admits that this is all new to her. They've always been together, but now it feels like he's slipping further away from her. Her vulnerability catches Shu off guard. With a sigh, he gently bonks her on the head, eliciting a small squeak of surprise. Calm down first, he says firmly, meeting her gaze. Is that really the kind of lovey-dovey she was thinking about? There's no way he'd be fine with it if she weren't. Don't do something that goes against herself. Her expression softens as his words sink in, and she nods slowly, understanding his perspective. Scratching his head, Shu turns to Amane and apologizes for the trouble. He then makes an unexpected request, allowing Sayo to join the student council, promising that he will take responsibility for her. Amane looks at him, startled by his plea. She hesitates, unsure of how to respond. Yumimi steps forward, nervously offering her support for the idea. Amane glances at her in confusion, prompting Yumimi to explain that having Sayo around might actually help. Rather than leaving her alone, it's better for Sayo to be with them, where they can keep an eye on her. Yumimi even admits that she pities Sayo's situation. With both Shu and Yumimi pleading earnestly, Amane lets out a resigned sigh. Fine, she mutters, it can't be helped. Turning to Sayo, she asks if she's all right with the arrangement. Sayo's demeanor immediately shifts, and she teasingly asks if this means she'll officially manage Shu now. He groans, already regretting his decision. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl watches the group from outside the room, her expression twisted with boredom. Gritting her teeth, she whispers to herself that things are too dull and decides to make them more entertaining. As the group settles into the discussion, Shu suddenly notices the bottle of aphrodisiac on the ground, shattered. His stomach sinks, and before anyone can react, the effects of the spilled liquid take hold of Amane and Yumimi. Both girls stiffen before their faces flush, and they lose control of their composure. Sayo stares at them in confusion as their behavior becomes erratic. Within moments, the room descends into chaos. From outside, the mysterious girl smirks, her laughter echoing softly as she watches the scene unfold. Sayo, caught off guard by the commotion, stumbles and falls to the floor. The three of them surround Shu, their eyes gleaming with a strange mix of affection and mischief. The three girls close in on him, their smiles unnervingly playful. Shu, trapped in the center, looks at them awkwardly, unsure of what to do. The three girls surround Shu, their expressions a mix of mischief and affection, while he stands frozen in confusion. His thoughts race as he wonders why Sayo isn't holding back and what exactly is happening. Outside the room, the girl observes the chaos with glee, stifling her laughter. She knows that Shu is utterly clueless about her interference. After all, she had acted while invisible, ensuring no one could detect her. The girl notices something peculiar. The aphrodisiac seems to have no effect on Shu. Watching his bewildered expression only heightens her excitement. She wonders how long he can endure the situation, knowing that the others have completely lost control. Yumimi, acting on pure impulse, climbs onto Shu, her strength making it impossible for him to resist. Despite his best efforts, he's no match for her physical power. Before he can think of a way to escape, Amane steps closer, her voice sharp and teasing as she asks if he is ignoring her. Flustered, he stammers, asking if this isn't affecting her too much. Amane tilts her head, her expression a little too relaxed, and asks what is affecting her. She opens her mouth to speak further, and Shu notices something alarming. Her demeanor is less like someone under the influence of an aphrodisiac and more like someone completely intoxicated. Meanwhile, Yumimi clings to him, her face mere inches from his. She demands more pats, her voice filled with a desperate longing. Their faces are so close that Shu can feel her breath against his skin. Flustered, he freezes as the tension in the air grows. The girl, still observing from her hiding spot, can hardly contain her excitement. She wonders if Shu has finally given up. Just as Amane leans in for a kiss, Shu quickly turns his head to avoid it. The sudden motion causes her lips to land on Yumimi's instead. Both girls freeze in shock, and Shu's eyes widen in disbelief. Amane, pulling back slightly, stammers, "I am sorry, Yumimi." Trembling, Yumimi looks at Amane with wide eyes. She asks, "Why me?" clearly flustered. But before she can stop herself, her body acts on its own, and she leans in to kiss Amane again. Shu watches the scene unfold, utterly dumbfounded. He mutters under his breath that she is definitely a devil kisser, unable to believe what's happening. Suddenly, Sayo takes the initiative. With a determined look, she climbs on top of Shu, her movements decisive. Her tone is playful, but the blush on her cheeks reveals her embarrassment. Shu becomes even more flustered, struggling to move but unable to free himself. The girl watching from outside smirks, her anticipation growing. "It's finally starting," she whispers, her eyes gleaming with amusement. Sayo leans in closer, her expression softening. Shu's eyes widen, and he quickly retorts, "This is because of the drug." Sayo freezes at his words, her face betraying her shock. Shu continues, his voice steady but firm, saying she should know how much he has endured under her constant teasing. And he can't call himself her childhood friend if he can't handle this much. He pauses, his tone softening, and asks if she is under the influence of a drug. Her hesitation is evident as her expression falters. Slowly, she begins to understand the weight of his words. Realization dawns on Sayo, and she gradually lets him go. Her face flushes with a mix of embarrassment and relief. She whispers before apologizing and stepping away. Just as the tension begins to settle, a voice breaks through. "What's the point of all this?" the girl mutters, her tone laced with frustration. Appearing from the shadows, she stares at Shu with irritation. "It was finally getting to the good part, and now you've ruined it," she says, calling him an idiot. Sayo's expression hardens, her voice turning icy. She asks sharply who she is, why she's calling Shu by his first name, and why she's acting so familiar with him. The girl smirks, unfazed by Sayo's accusatory tone. She muses that Sayo has a good sense of smell. Sayo's eyes narrow, her suspicions growing. Shu, equally on edge, demands an explanation. He asks why she did this. The girl's smirk grows, her teasing demeanor intensifying as she casually remarks that her actions will undoubtedly help him toughen up, her tone dripping with mockery. Sayo's glare hardens, frustration evident as she steps closer. She demands an explanation, pressing for clarity on the stranger's intentions and the cryptic remark that has unsettled her. Unbothered by the confrontation, the girl dismisses Sayo's anger with a wave of her hand. She leans casually against the wall, introducing herself with an air of superiority as Kiriyama Yu, someone who considers herself a close friend of Shu. She adds with a knowing smirk that she looks forward to getting along with everyone.